Hello and welcome back to the Game Room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love? Talking about games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 4,888 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. We are 12 subscribers away from 4,900 on that final countdown of 100 to 5,000. Thank you guys so much to all you fellow idiots who bought a Switch 2 last week. I hope you're enjoying Mario Kart World. I know I am. I gotta say, personally, one of my biggest complaints with Mario Kart 8 was the amount of min-maxing with being able to customize your cars. So having just vehicles again, like it's back on Double Dash days, is pretty nice. Now, I haven't played that much of it, and I'm sure some of you don't like that, but for me, that was one of my big reasons why I didn't care for Mario Kart 8. I'm not all about figuring out the best meta build. I want to see what you can do when you have to play around with things that aren't optimal for all occasions. Anyways, that's not what we're talking about this week. I mentioned that I had enough games to probably do one 3DS video. I might have enough to do two, but we're starting off with this one, so if that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out.
There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
Alright, so I do apologize. Usually I got more of a diversity of games with my collections here, but on the 3DS, I have a very small collection of 3DS games, and they are very largely of one specific genre. And I'll get started with one of the heaviest hitters in my entire collection, and that would be the Fire Emblem Fates Special Edition. So this bad boy came out, and I missed it. I didn't think I needed it because I pre-ordered Birthright and I pre-ordered Conquest. I have them. But then lo and behold, there was a third version released called Revelation, I want to say. And it was only released digitally. However, it does come physically on this collection. And what made this even cooler is that that version of it was not launched immediately when the game launched. However, if you got this, you got that third version of the game when the game came out. Now, I missed this. I got lucky. I was trolling Craigslist looking for deals, and I want to say I managed to find it for $100 a couple of years, or maybe a year after it came out, which was around what it originally released at. At the time, I think it was only going for about $150. Now, last I saw, it was around $500-600. And it's probably going to keep going up, especially if Fire Emblem just becomes more and more popular. And I will say, I really enjoyed the heck out of Fates. I probably enjoyed Conquest more than the other two versions, just because it was so brutally hard. Unlike the previous Awakening, this game, instead of having two characters partner up to be on the offense, now you would partner up a character to be on the defense. All in all, though, really fun game. I liked the hell out of it. All three versions of it I did play and beat. I covered the game on one of my worst performing videos ever a few years ago. If you want to check that out, you can see my thoughts on the game. But yes, that is one of my holy grails in my collection. I didn't expect it to be that way, but it was something that I'm glad that I grabbed, especially when I did, because it has just gone up and up and up. And once again, if you really want that limited, or not limited, but if you want a physical version of Fire Emblem Revelation, it's the only way you can get it. They never launched a standalone, so it's only just a DLC, which I think I did buy the DLC, but the way it works is the first 6 chapters in all 3 games are about the same, and then you come to a pivotal choice where you either go with the Birthright family, the Conquest family, or the Revelation pathway, which I won't spoil what that entails. All 3 of them have an interesting ending. I think Conquest by far has the hardest ending. Which one is most satisfying? I'll leave it up to you guys, but that is a good one. If you can get Special Edition Fire Emblem Fates for a good deal, jump on it, because once again, not everyone knows that that's the only way you can get the third version on the disc. Alright, moving on from that. So this was a game that was a late release on the 3DS. I want to say this came out in either 2018, maybe even 2019. It was kind of a surprise too, because at this point the Switch had been out for a couple of years. It was very evident that the Switch was kind of going to combine the handheld and the console space for Nintendo. But then this game was announced and came out and was pretty good, and that was Metroid Samus Returns. It's Samus Returns, yes. So it's actually a remake of Metroid 2. And it flips, instead of Metroid Return of Samus, it's Samus Returns. This actually was made by the team that went on to make Metroid Dread. Now, I will say Metroid Dread, in my opinion, is far superior, though this is still a fun game. They really introduced some of those mechanics that they would go into Dread with, as far as the robots. So the way that there's different Metroids you chase down within this game. Now, I have not played the original Game Boy version. I picked that up after I played this one, but I was not a huge fan of how this game played out. Now, part of that is just I'm not a big handheld player. I don't know why the Switch has some sort of sorcery, and I like playing Switch in docked mode or in handheld mode. But on the 3DS, having the two separate screens for myself always left a little bit to be desired. But this is a good one to grab. It was a later release on the 3DS. It is a very solid Metroid game, and if you like the way Metroid Dread plays, then you can see the game that the team kind of cut their teeth on with this one. Now, here's one that I bought the 3DS for. Now, back in 2012, maybe 2012 or early 2013, I saw an article for this game, and I immediately was like, I need to get a 3DS. At the time, I was dating my wife, and she, being the wonderful person she was, went out and bought me a damn 3DS. Not only for myself, she bought one for herself. Still to this day, incredible. And the game that I wanted to get that 3DS for was the sequel to the greatest game of all time, in my opinion, at that time. And that was The Legend of Zelda, The Link Between Worlds. So this takes place in the Link to the Past world, but in the future. So it came out in 2013, which is hard to believe. It's a 12-year-old game now. But at the time, there really was not a really well-handled remake where it paid homage and respect to the original, but then added these new flavors to it. So gone is the light world and dark world. Now you have Hyrule and Lorule. And the way you go between these two worlds is that Link gets the ability to jump into paintings or jump into a flat canvas and then can side scroll through different areas. Almost like a 2D mechanic within the world. And then that would let him slip into the cracks that goes into this alternate version of Hyrule, which is now called Lorule. Brilliant spin. Like, Nintendo's very good at this, where they do a game in the same vein as something else they've done before, but they really do it in a way that respects the original game, but then makes a new game that is really fun. And the big claim to fame on this one is that they really introduced a mechanic in a Zelda series we'd never seen before, where you could pretty much go to any dungeon in any order you want. As well as at the beginning of the game, there's this guy in a purple cloak who jumps into your house and then starts selling you items. Now, he plays a role, believe it or not, pretty pivotal in this game, but his initial thing is that he sells you items. So you can go to him and you can buy the hookshot, or you can buy the torch, or you can buy the hammer. And what happens is if you die, you lose that item and it goes back to him. However, you have the ability to garner enough money where you can permanently buy the items off him. And there's a lot of plays on familiarity with Link to the Past. If you know it, there's some similarities that go out throughout the game, such as the doubling of the magic bar, things like that. Really, really fun game. I have fond memories of this game. It really, as much as I love the Link to the Past, which at the time was the greatest game I'd ever played, it still is in my top 3, but I think in recent years I might be putting Final Fantasy Tactics above it. And even then, with Clair Obscur that just came out, I know recency bias, but that is in my top 5 already. It was so good. But the fact that this game was not an embarrassment, but instead was so good, it almost, I would say in every way, is just as good as Link to the Past, just without the nostalgia behind it. I don't know. Wonderful, wonderful game. That is one that's getting more expensive to have. There's a special 3DS version of it too. That's super expensive. I wish I picked that up. But yes, that's a good one. Grab that one if you can find it. Now, speaking of Zelda, now recently in doing the Xbox 360 videos, I have learned that the Adventure Time series seems to love emulating the Zelda series. Well, when I did a search of Zelda 2 clones maybe a couple of years ago, a game that came up was Adventure Time King, Why Did You Steal Our Garbage? And I have not put this one in yet, but it plays and looks just like a Zelda 2 clone. And Zelda 2 is one of my favorite Zeldas of all time as well. And so that's all there really is about this. Now, this is a pretty cheap game, too. I think I got it complete for about $13. But if you, like me, love Zelda 2, and really, as many Zelda clones as there are out there, there are not many Zelda 2 clones. That was what's so nice about that game. Infernax I covered. There's another game that came out called Elliot Quest that I believe is supposed to be like Zelda 2. But yes, this one looks a hell of a lot like a Zelda 2 clone. And after playing those other Adventure Time games that did play very serviceable as a Zelda clone, I want to check that one out. So let me know if you guys have experience with that game. Is that a good one? Did I find a solid game there? Because the reviews of it were pretty solid too. I know nothing about the TV show. All right, here's a random one. So I picked this game up because I love the series. Now this has kind of become the black sheep of the series, as it really does not play like the original game at all. It came out after the third game in the series, and luckily this did not submarine the series, and we did get a fourth one because Shigeru Miyamoto seems to love it. At least that's the meme. If he ever mentions it, oh, Pikmin 5's coming. Well, yes, we're talking about Hey Pikmin. And you'll notice my game is still sealed. So once again, I am just not a big 3DS person. And the gimmick with this game is, yes, you play as Olimar, you control Pikmin, you're going through levels. However, in this one, it is a side-scroller. It is not a isometric or top-down game where you're controlling and moving around grabbing things. This one is a pure side-scroller in the Pikmin universe. Now, I've heard a few people who said it is pretty good, but by and large, everything, at least the reviewers when this came out, said it was not good. So I don't know where I would land on that one. Yet again, I'm sorry, I have not played that game either. But it is one that I would like to give a shot. Check it out. I've played all the other Pikmins to completion. I have every single version of Pikmin. I've bought every possible version of Pikmin outside of the ones that came out on the Wii, as I love it. I love the series. It's my most favorite underrated Nintendo series. And if you haven't checked out Pikmin, highly recommend. My personal favorite is number 2, but if you're interested in it, check out Pikmin 4. It is the best gateway into that series. All right, now the game that you think I would have bought a 3DS to play, because I loved Fire Emblem, The Path of Radiance, but when I played Radiant Dawn, I was not a huge fan of it, and then the series kind of went dormant. They released a couple of Game Boy games, but once again, not into the handhelds, and then there was the DS remake of one with Shadow Dragon. But then I remember this game came out on the 3DS maybe a year after the 3DS came out, because the 3DS did not have a good launch, and that game is Fire Emblem Awakening. So to this day, you will probably find a lot of people who say this is their favorite Fire Emblem, and we owe a lot to this game, because Fire Emblem Awakening, no joke, saved the Fire Emblem franchise. This was them being told, hey, this is your last go-around Intelligent Systems, you're going to go to making Advance Wars or something else, but put everything into this game and say good riddance. And you know what? They did, and they came out with a brilliant gimmick that harkens back to older Fire Emblems, but also once you know the Fire Emblem landscape, makes a lot of sense. And what happens in this game is they really leaned heavily on the relationship aspects, which was something that you had in the earlier Fire Emblems where you could unlock support conversations. But now when you unlock these support conversations amongst the other characters that are not the main characters, they could then evolve into a relationship. And if you got them to the part where they got married or something like that, you then would unlock a future child, and depending on which father was with which mother or vice versa, the child would always be the same child as far as their name, but their hair color would be different. So if the father had black hair, blonde hair, red hair, then the child would have that color hair. But then that would be an amalgamation of the two parents together, but then have their own style. And so you could garner extra troops this way, as well as you would open up new maps. So in the older Fire Emblems, when you would play, you would just play a chapter and the games would go on. In this game, they introduced sort of a hub world where you could replay old missions and level your characters. You could play challenge maps. There was a whole thing with Street Pass where you could unlock additional classic characters or fight against them like Ike, things like that. And then it also gave you the ability to recruit these additional characters. So then when the two characters would combine and they would have a child, the future child would then somehow step into the past, not getting into that. The story in this game is all over the place, as well as they introduced the first avatar character, because in previous Fire Emblems, you always were playing as a lord or somebody, but when they remade Fire Emblem 3, which was Mystery of the Emblem, and they released that only in Japan, they came up with this new idea where they had an avatar character, and that one did really well, which allowed them to make this commercial game for everyone, and then that avatar character has stayed the same ever since. So they had an avatar character in Awakening, in Fates, in Three Houses, in kind of not in Engage, and yeah, Three Houses you are playing as Byleth, but more or less. Anyways, Fire Emblem Awakening we owe a lot to because it saved the series, and it really is the most casual friendly. It introduced the casual mode if you don't want to play on hardcore where you have permadeath. It is a lot easier than Fates. It is, in my opinion, a more approachable game than Three Houses because it doesn't have so much bloat to it. Though there is a lot of grinding you can do in this if you want to get those extra characters, those extra challenge maps, etc. But a wonderful game. Really, really, really love it. It has a 3DS version too that is super collectible if you can find it. But yeah, that's a good one. Alright, last few here. So this is a game that I picked up at GameStop, and they had it listed for a price, and then when I took it to the register, they said, oh, that wasn't the right price, but I managed to complain enough that they did honor the price. At least I think they did. And that was the new Super Mario Bros. 2. So when New Super Mario Bros. Came out on the DS, I absolutely loved it. It was a return to form to the 2D side-scrolling Mario games. The one that released on the Wii was a lot of fun. I played the hell out of that. And then this, I think, was the last one of that series before they then went to Mario 3D Land, also on the 3DS. This one did not get great reviews. There was a very heavy emphasis on coin collection, but it kind of wore thin. The new Super Mario Bros. Series really wore thin very quickly because they didn't really do much to evolve with it. You know, you can get us with the first game with the nostalgia, the one on the Wii because you had 4 players, but then when you got to New Super Mario Bros. 2, it just really felt like more of the same. Now, it did sell really well. This is not super collectible, but I mean, it's still probably like $40 or so. But I enjoyed it. I really liked this game. I still remember playing the original New Super Mario Brothers when a kid, this was probably when I was in college, and a kid, maybe 11 or 12, I was at my buddy's house, and it was his stepbrothers or something like that. And they said, oh, come on, old man. And so I pick up the 3DS, and I just completely destroyed a level he was dying on. And he looked at me like, what? I'm like, bro, I've been playing this game since before you were born. It's Mario. It controls exactly the same. But yes, those are fun. Those are good ones to get. And we're not really. I don't see Nintendo going back to the 2D Mario outside of. I mean, Super Mario Wonder was really cool, but that's what was nice is it changed the formula. Whereas New Super Mario Bros. 2 really was just continuing on that New Super Mario Bros. All right, now this is the last collector's edition I have here, and it's the last Fire Emblem game on the 3DS. I've talked about Fates and I've talked about Awakening, but there was another game called Fire Emblem Echoes: Shadows of Valentia. And Fire Emblem Echoes was actually a remake of Fire Emblem Gaiden, the second Fire Emblem game. And Fire Emblem Gaiden, much like back in the early 90s, was a big deviation from the original. Kind of like Castlevania 2, Zelda 2, Mario Brothers 2, even though that's Doki Doki Panic. But still, there was a big trend of the sequel coming out to a game on the NES and being very, very different. And Fire Emblem Gaiden was no exception. So it is still a turn-based game and all that, grid-based and everything. But in this one, there is a map that you can choose. So when I said earlier that Awakening was the first one, this one also had the ability. And then there were dungeons you could go into and come into random encounters. The way you would upgrade your characters was slightly different. They would need to find, like, it really introduced some of the mechanics that then would grow more and more later in the series. As well as it was before the triangle of the spear, axe, and sword. And it also had you swapping between two different characters, Alma and the girl's name. I can't remember her name. All in all, though, I really enjoyed the NES version of the game. The 3DS version of the game, I really didn't care for. I don't know what it was. It's that sophomore slump or just too much of a good thing. By this point, I had played Awakening to Death, 80 hours plus. I played all 3 versions of Fates, and then Echoes came out, and then I think they had announced 3 Houses, and I was not enjoying it. I had also played Fire Emblem Gaiden the previous year on the NES, and really liked it, and I did not like the changes they put into Fire Emblem Gaiden. Now, some of the things they did in it are very cool. They actually implemented in Fire Emblem Engage, of all games, where after you beat the map, you could run around the map and kind of explore things. That harkens a little bit to the exploration phases they put into Fire Emblem Gaiden, but I really need to give this game a better shot, because I did not really put too much into it. But it's just it's hard sometimes. You know, you get too much like this video. I've talked about Fire Emblem to death. So I'm going to pivot off of this one, and we're going to talk about another Intelligent Systems game, which kind of came out and was gone with a whimper. And ironically, I have 2 copies of this game, or at least I had 2 copies of this game, because I bought it brand new. And then my buddy Espejo bought it for me for my 29th birthday. And that was Codename Steam. So this is yet another game I haven't opened on the 3DS, but it more or less uses kind of this fictional, real life, like Abraham Lincoln's a character, all this kind of craziness. It's a grid-based game, but it's not exactly a grid-based game as far as in your traditional sense of a turn-based tactical RPG. And it was just Intelligent Systems having fun, I think, where they made this completely off-the-wall zonky game, not like Advance Wars and not like Fire Emblem. Unfortunately, it did not do well, even with me getting 2 copies. The series is gone, and I think Intelligent Systems is just going to be making Fire Emblem games until the cows come home. But a really, really unique game. If you ever see Codename Steam, it is luckily not super pricey yet, but it could be if it ever gets a large enough audience, though I think it's kind of that Coldcept Saga audience where it's complicated enough that it's not going to be so approachable that not everyone's going to want it, but maybe it could pop off at some point. I don't know. And then the last game we're going to talk about just got a re-release on the Switch too, so you might as well talk about it or pick up the cheap version now that will be Bravely Default. So this was a game that I wanted to like so much. I believe it's made by the same people who ended up doing Octopath Traveler. And I want to say they cut their teeth on this game so that Octopath Traveler could fly. I played through it and I just could not get behind the art design of it. It just felt like I was playing as toddlers the whole game, and I just couldn't get behind it. As well as after I put it down, my buddy Sean, who did end up beating it, told me about how, spoilers, when you beat the game, you actually have to go through and play through essentially an identical storyline 3 additional times. I think it's because there's 4 elements, like fire, wind, water, that kind of thing. So you basically go back and repeat the exact same cycle 3 additional times. Now, I'm sure things are a little bit different, but it has sounded exceptionally boring. And the other thing about the combat system that was so revolutionary, because this was a turn-based game back, much like Clair Obscur right now, is kind of revolutionized turn-based combat. Bravely Default sort of got that reputation when it came out in the early 2013-ish, but it didn't pick up as much. And the thing it did is it allowed you to either store attacks or use excessive attacks. So that'd be the Bravely system where you use more than 1 attack, or the default system where you basically store your attack. Now, I loved the Bravely system. I did not care for the default system. Basically, skipping a turn so that you could then do a bigger turn was not that much of a, was not a great incentive for myself. I didn't like the strategy of that. What was nice is in Octopath Traveler, they fixed that by giving you the boost points, whereas the boost points effectively behave like the Bravely system. They wisely got rid of the default system. So I enjoyed that. I think that was a much better thing to do. Clair Obscur is sort of similar thing with the kind of action points, the way you can store them. But anyways, that's a good one to get. Now that there's the Switch version, that one might be this one might be cheaper. Though I think the Switch version is a game key card, which, oh god, that sucks too. But anyways, that's another one to pick up. There is basically my RPG collection on the 3DS. I'm sorry I didn't have more random games, but what are you going to do? It's just not a system I collect that much for. But let me know what games you guys have on the 3DS, what other games I should look out for. As a reminder, I release a new video every Tuesday. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.